It's truly amazing the amount of information people can extract just based on how you look, or your physical appearance, how you sound, how you conduct yourself, who you hang out with, or what kind of music you listen to. One of my favorite contemporary authors, Malcolm Gladwell, writes a book on this called Blink, where he explains this theory that he comes up with called thin slicing, where essentially we use all of our past experience in life and operate at an unconscious or subconscious level to evaluate someone or something as quickly as possible. And I want to talk about how everybody, including myself, as being a great example of this, can be a product of inaccurate thin slicing. If I were to ask you where I come from, who my parents are, what kind of academic interests I have, you'd probably get some of it right, but you'd also get a lot of it wrong. And just as I would get some of it right for you and some of it wrong as well. And I want to explain through my experience in life how this is the case. So I was born in Seoul, Korea, and as far as I'm aware, both my parents are Korean, which makes me Korean. But I was adopted at only 5 months old by my parents today, and I have no recollection or any memory, any experience. I don't speak Korean, nothing of Korea. All I have is I know I grew up in Brainerd, Minnesota, northern Minnesota, for the first 14 years of my life. So elementary school, middle school, to the end of middle school, actually until I was 14 years old, my family and I moved to Vienna, Austria, which is in Europe, Central Europe, where I spent my last 4 years of high school there. I'm 21 years old today, and now I'm at Hamlin, and I'm going to explain now how I've been seen through different lenses throughout my entire life. So, of course, in middle school, it was always kind of weird, and elementary school as well, but especially middle school because I appear Asian, I am Korean, but people would always ask me, well, you don't sound Korean, you don't really act Korean, which I didn't really know what that meant at the time, and I don't really think they knew what it meant to act Korean either, but that's not the point. But then I moved to Vienna, Austria in high school, and people were even more confused, especially because I was in an international school, so I was surrounded by people from all over the world, and Koreans included. So the Koreans would think that, well, you look Korean, but you don't sound Korean, obviously. You sound American. In fact, you sound like you're from the Midwest, which is, I hope that was a good thing, but I don't know. And they'd be like, well, you're kind of fake Korean. And I would always say, well, I never really considered myself Korean to begin with. I consider myself from Minnesota. And this was always, even more amplified in high school, but it got even more amplified as soon as I came to Hamlin, because people would ask, well, where did you go to high school? And I would say, well, I went to high school in Europe. And that would really throw people for a spin, because they'd say, well, are you European then? Would you consider yourself European? No, I don't consider myself European other than I speak German. I don't consider myself Korean other than I look Korean. I consider myself, well, from Minnesota. I consider myself American. That's where I've spent the majority of my life, and it's pretty much all I've known. And so I have these very unique experiences. You could pretty much divide them up into thirds, and they create who you are. And everyone has these unique experiences, whether they're bigger, whether they're smaller. It doesn't matter what scale they operate on, but everyone has these experiences that influence who they are in the present moment. And what I'm trying to say is, I'm a product of inaccurate thin slicing, just as everyone else is a product of inaccurate thin slicing. It's really just, we as humans, we try to stereotype people and break them down and make it easier on ourselves to evaluate someone, when in reality we actually don't know their full story. So my full story is that, and I hope that this will influence you to engage with somebody on a more personal level, to actually get to know them, and not be a consequence of thin slicing.